Hi, everybody. I'm Dana Bowman. Welcome to another episode of Thyroid Refresh TV. And I'm here with my partner, Jenny Mahar, and the amazing Mickey Trescott. Thank you so much for joining us, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, you guys.
Well, we're so excited for you, Mickey, and we are so excited about your brand new book, The Nutrient-Dense Kitchen.
Yes.
Woo-hoo.
Gorgeous.
Aww.
Yeah. So lovely. Really, the pictures, the quality, the information. Great job.
Well, and it's always exciting for this healing community and the AIP community, especially, to have new resources. And yours have been so valuable to us. I know when I started out on this journey, your previous book was one of the first ones that I bought because AIP can be so restrictive. And it was like, I'm a chef, but I need some ideas and some help. And so thank you for all that you've done for the autoimmune community and the wellness community to help give us those empowering resources.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind of you to say. I'm excited that it helped you. And, I see it like a puzzle. A lot of people think of going on an elimination diet or even just trying to change their diet a little bit for the better as kind of like this forever thing that just has to ruin their relationship with food or having flavorful or easy meals ever again. And I just want to show people that isn't how it has to be,
Well, before we dive in, we're going to get into some good stuff, eating for healing all over the place. I want to give everybody a little bit of background about Mickey. NTP prides herself in finding creative solutions to preparing, cooking, and succeeding on allergen-free diets, which is what we were just talking about. She is a certified nutritional therapy practitioner and author of the best-selling guide to the Autoimmune Protocol, the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook. With her partner, Angie Alt, she co-authored the Autoimmune Wellness Handbook, an award-winning guide that teaches a whole lifestyle approach to healing from autoimmune disease. Her newest release, The Nutrient-Dense Kitchen, focuses on nutrient density, an often overlooked aspect to deep healing with food, which is so true. In 2012, Mickey founded AutoimmuneWellness.com, whose website and social media channels serve millions of readers annually, including Jenny and I, with recipes and sources for living well with chronic illness. With Angie Alt and Sarah Ballantyne, she co-created and co-teaches the AIP Certified Coach Practitioner Training Program, an advanced training for practitioners across the spectrum of both natural and conventional healthcare. Boy, does she have any free time? I'm just not sure.
Working on that. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. It's great to be here.
So why don't we start with your personal story? I know you're an autoimmune patient. You've faced your own health issues and health journey. Tell us your story of how you ate yourself well.
All right. Well, if you've got about 3 hours, I can tell you the whole story, but I don't think we want to be here that long. So like a lot of women, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's after a pretty long and drawn out history of going from doctor to doctor, being told it was all in my head. I was 26 years old and I didn't have that classic hypothyroid presentation. So, I wasn't gaining a lot of weight, but I did have really cold hands and feet, really low body temperature, hair falling out, really worsening anxiety, depression, insomnia, and a variety of other things, numbness in my fingertips. So it took me 6 doctors, along that way. It was like, okay, here's some antidepressants. Maybe you have an eating disorder. You're just too sensitive, all of that, which I'm sure you guys hear the story all the time. I hear it all the time with my clients. And, to be in your 20s and just completely not function. I mean, I lost my job. I was bedridden. And I started to believe that maybe it was kind of in my head, So I finally, through a long, phase of Googling, learned about thyroid disease and learned that I had pretty much all the symptoms except for weight gain, which I suspect because I later found out that I also have celiac disease, which, the two together can kind of overlap, and cause one disease not to present in a classic way. And so I ended up with a diagnosis of Hashimoto's and celiac once I started asking the right questions and demanding the right tests. It was very clear once I got that right testing that I was sick. And the hardest, actually, the most difficult part of the whole journey was that once I got that diagnosis, my doctor said, there's nothing you can do but eat a gluten-free diet. And I had actually been eating a gluten-free diet in the process of kind of trying to figure this out. And I felt terrible. So, I was told my thyroid levels were normal. I didn't need medication. And the thing that really got me curious about changing my diet was that I had been vegan for 10 years. And I kept asking my doctors, does this have anything to do with my diet? And they said, no, a low-fat, a vegan diet is the best diet you can be on. Your condition has nothing to do with your diet. And something inside me, I was not looking for an excuse to eat meat. I had been vegan for over 10 years. But something stirred, and I was like, you know what, I need to look into nutrients, because I feel like my vegan diet, there's all these reasons why I do it, but I don't actually know if it's the right way to nourish my body. And when I looked into the connection of diet and autoimmune disease, what I actually found out was that a lot of foods that are really heavy in a vegan and vegetarian diet, so grains and legumes, that's where you're getting your protein, and even nuts and seeds, are actually most problematic for people with autoimmune disease. So I kind of went, oh, and then I saw these researchers who were talking about how the nutrients that are most available in animal foods are actually used at a higher rate in an autoimmune process. So I started putting those pieces together. I found out about the Autoimmune Protocol. I mean, this was a very long phase for me. It was about a 6-month transition from the depths of my illness to where I could kind of start really implementing a dietary protocol. Like I said, I was very sick, but a few years later, I had transformed my whole life. I had gotten completely back on my feet. I'd gotten to the point where I felt healthier than probably, I was since I was a teenager. And it started with that, changing my diet and starting to incorporate the animal foods, and then doing the elimination. So hopefully that wasn't
no, it's very powerful. What a powerful story, because you were eating gluten-free, right?
Totally.
And so to have that revelation and be like, well, I'm already eating gluten-free and I don't feel well still.
Yeah.
Then to have to take it another step further and another step beyond that. It's incredible that you were able to do that. And then, like you said, you were able to kind of wake up after 6 months. And then after a couple of years, you were like, okay, hello world.
Well,
watch out.
And 3 months after I had my diagnosis, I was at the bottom of my journey where I started having symptoms of neurological problems. So like multiple sclerosis. And I also was having some pleurisy, which is like an inflammation in the lining of the lungs. And, my doctors at that time were like, oh, well, you're probably developing another autoimmune disease. It's really common with people that have autoimmune disease. Maybe you have lupus, maybe you have MS, but you need to have those symptoms for 6 months before we can really dig in and do more testing and get a thorough diagnosis. And that was when I was like, oh, I'm not gonna deal with this for 6 months. No. So you could put a label on it. I got to do something now,
It just hurts my heart to hear that, to hear, the point where you were like, I started to wonder, is this just all in my head? When you're told that by medical professionals so much, it can be so discouraging and hopeless. And we hear from these people all the time, every day, who are like, I'm barely functional. I have multiple health issues, potentially multiple autoimmune issues, and I don't even know how to get out of here because, this is, the doctors don't really know, how to help me.
And, it's funny because
that point of hopelessness, am I ever going to come back from this?
Am I ever going to feel better? I remember being at the doctor over 25 years ago and asking, and not knowing anything. Can you imagine back then, that many years ago, what, there was no information like we have now, and asking and having the wherewithal to say, could I be doing something more? Should I be changing the way I do things? I didn't necessarily say changing my diet. I think I said change, adding foods in, or maybe taking some vitamins, or is there anything more that I can be doing, And I specifically remember him going, well, yeah, you could take a multivitamin.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm the doctor now, I don't have a degree, so I can't tell you what a medical doctor would say, but as just a regular thyroid patient, I would say, yeah, drink some more water, get some sun, get outside, get some movement. Like, he didn't say any of those things. Do some research, be your own advocate. I mean, he was just like, yeah, you can. And then I said, well, do you have one that you recommend? No, just, your basic, I mean,
Yeah.
just amazing to where we are now, and thinking about people who are suffering. I don't remember what I was there for, but not like you bedridden, or most women that Jenny and I hear from all the time, and how I felt several years ago, just terrible. Mm-hmm. It just hurts my heart. Like Jenny said, it's unbelievable. So to have a resource like your book, and to have you,
and here you are now. Fantastic. And I mean, you're such a warm, approachable, and humble person, but guys, Mickey is a powerhouse. I mean, you have absolutely changed the world of wellness, and especially autoimmune wellness. Your website, Autoimmune Wellness, is one of the most amazing resources out there for this community. This is your third cookbook. The first one was, the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook, and then there was the Autoimmune Wellness Handbook, and now the Nutrient-Dense Kitchen. I mean, these are such incredible resources, and so it's such an inspiring path you've been on. Can you talk a little bit about your trajectory from that point of, okay, I'm starting to feel better, I'm learning about my body, I'm becoming empowered and implementing some changes that are helping, to then now, being one of the most influential cookbook authors in the world of healing nutrition?
Oh, that's a lot of really kind things. Thank you. So the thing that really made me want to do this is actually I got well with a community of people online in like support groups and connecting through with bloggers and through my own blog and sharing my own story. I was really encouraged and lifted up and learned a lot from this community. And when I was in the depths of my illness, I had a lot of time to think about how I wanted to shift my career. So I had been cooking before. I'd worked as a personal chef, and that was my favorite job that I had ever had. I love food. I love preparing food. I love learning about where food comes from. I've always loved nutrition. And so when I, didn't have a job and I was plotting my wellness journey, I was thinking, when I'm well enough, I want to go back to cooking, but how am I going to make this work with my new dietary restrictions? And so I got a job that, I was working as a personal chef for a family that didn't have dietary restrictions, but then I had to cook food for them that had gluten in it and, some other ingredients I didn't eat. And it was they were very accommodating, and I ended up working for them for a couple years. And what that brought to me was a job that, where they knew where I was at with my health and my illness, and were very open and accepting and happy to talk about things, or, give me time off if I wasn't feeling well. I just could not have asked for a better situation in that side. But also it made me realize that actually what I was doing, I needed to be a little more firm about not handling the foods that don't make me feel good, So I started to think about writing a book, because I was like, well, how am I going to use this cooking background and the skill that I have, and also the experience that I have in healing myself, and put that together and provide resources for other people. So it started with a cookbook that I gave away to a community on Facebook, because I gained so much from being a part of that community that then I wanted to give them the recipes they needed in order to get well. And everything has just kind of grown from there, just wanting to help and wanting to serve and wanting to guide people who are going through something that I went through, whether that's, being informed and empowered and learning about illnesses and how to go into your doctor's office and ask for what you want, but then also how to implement, how to cook, how to batch cook, how to actually make this long-term and sustainable, because it's not something you just do for 30 days. I think some people have that misconception that, okay, I'm going to do AIP for a short while and then I'm just going to go back to whatever I was doing before. It's really a whole life's change. Like everything about my life, including my career, my relationships with my family, my friends, what I eat, the way that I sleep, exercise, everything has changed, Mm-hmm. And breaking that down and making it really approachable and not overwhelming for people, and then feeling like they're in charge and they're feeling strong and empowered and positive about it, instead of feeling again like they're a part of that is just too much or too stressful. So
right. What was the inspiration behind your latest project, the Nutrient Dense Kitchen?
So the Autoimmune Protocol has been around now for about 7 years, and I wrote the first AIP cookbook, the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook. And since then, so when I personally did the protocol about 7 years ago, there were only 4 other bloggers on the internet that I knew of that were actually doing AIP at the same time. And we all connected and compared notes. And one of them was Sarah Ballantyne, another one was Angie Alt. So I've partnered a lot with both of those ladies. But back then, nutrient density was a concept of the Autoimmune Protocol, that it wasn't that you eliminate foods and then if you aren't successful, you then think about nutrient density. It was both and. So you eliminated foods, and then in their place, you bring in all these nutrient dense foods. So everyone that was doing AIP was doing lots of bone broth. They were eating organ meats. They were upping the fish and the shellfish, because really in the early days, we were all very connected to that why and the science, and the part, frankly, that works about AIP is not just that you're removing inflammatory or allergic triggers. You're bringing in all of these foods that are actually fueling and restoring and replenishing the body. And for me, having been vegan for 10 years, part of my journey, why I got so sick, a lot of people ask me this, like, well, I have Hashimoto's or I have celiac disease, but like I didn't get bedridden. Why did that happen to you? It happened to me because I was vegan for so long. I was just completely depleted of all the nutrients that my body needed to function. So I had been aware of this concept of nutrient density from the very beginning. I mean, from the moment that I ate red meat, my body temperature, I'd been taking my temperature, I was 93 to 94 degrees all the time. And my doctors still did not think I was hypothyroid, which blows my mind. And then the first time I ate red meat, I thought I was going to be sick. Because this is something that vegans and vegetarians is kind of a myth that is in the community. And after I ate it, my cheeks got pink and I just kind of felt like flushed a little bit and warm. And I took my temperature and I was like 97 degrees. And so from that moment, I was like, oh, nutrients, like there's something in this food that I need. So long story short, in the beginning, nutrient density was a very core focus, but now 7 years later, the Autoimmune Protocol has exploded. There's like dozens of books. There's like hundreds of bloggers. Doctors are prescribing it to their patients. All of this stuff is just incredible and amazing, and I'm very happy for it. But the piece that gets lost is nutrient density. So now we have people who try AIP, they take out all the grains, they take out all the legumes, they do the elimination phase, technically compliant, but they don't add in any of these nutrient dense foods because either they don't like how they taste, they don't know how to prepare them, they don't like vegetables. And so they white knuckle through kind of this version of AIP that I would say is actually not the right way to do it, just because you're not fueling, you're removing, but you're not fueling. So I wanted to write the Nutrient Dense Kitchen just to reassert how important nutrient density is, why it's a core component of the Autoimmune Protocol, why some people don't see success with AIP if they don't incorporate nutrient density, and then give a bunch of recipes to show people that eating this way is not weird. They don't have to venture that far out of their comfort zone, and to show them just some really easy, approachable ways to make these foods.
That's awesome. I feel like us as humans too, we have this way of, cleverly taking something that's supposed to be really healthy and making it unhealthy, like going gluten-free can turn into a diet that's just really high in gluten-free junk food, or even going paleo or autoimmune paleo can lead to a lot of bacon and overconsumption.
Totally.
How do we avoid those pitfalls? I mean, obviously that's what you're talking about with your book, but I know I've fallen into those pitfalls before. Do you have any advice to that?
Yeah.
Tendency
really
not to just eat the
Yeah. So like in the beginning, it was actually easier in a way. 7 years ago, there were no Epic bars. There were no store-bought bone broths. There were no, mail order AIP cookies. There were no AIP cookie recipes. There was no cake recipes. It was hard to get those recipes or those treats. There was no cassava flour, or at least culturally, it was not here yet in the way that we can buy it. So it was easier in a way that you had to focus on the basics. Really, the only foods that we had available to us were the meat, the vegetables, and the herbs, right? And so I work with a lot of people who go on AIP, they're making treats all the time. They're like, this is so expensive, this is so overwhelming. The things that are expensive and overwhelming are the things that we're using to feed our cravings or to replace something that, wasn't really a nutrient dense food or eaten at the appropriate time. So like if you have a muffin every day for a snack, simply by baking an AIP muffin to have as your morning snack every day, it will help you technically be compliant to AIP, but that muffin is taking the space of something like you could have some apple slices and pate instead, which would be that's completely different. It's in a different planet, basically, as far as nutrition, even though they're both technically AIP. So I like to encourage people to really focus on the basics first. So especially with time and budget, these are the things that people have in limited supply. I mean, maybe some people out there have all the time in the world and all the money in the world, but you are, very blessed. Good for you. Most of us don't exist in that reality. So the things that you want to put your energy towards and your money towards are going to be getting the most nutrient dense proteins, cooking them in batches, and then putting them on your plate with a ton of vegetables. Start there. If you have extra time or money after that is done, then you can do a little treat here and there. You can maybe once a week, you bake yourself some AIP muffins or make some little fat bombs or whatever makes you happy, because a lot of people, they find joy in that. But don't start with the treats. Don't start with the extra things. Don't start with the cassava flour or the mail order stuff, because that's the thing that makes a lot of people go, wait, I can't keep up with this forever,
Interesting.
So you talk about the term nutrivore in your book. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, so a nutrivore is, by my definition, someone who really goes out of their way to eat local, in-season foods, to eat a wide variety of foods, and foods that are really nutrient dense. So you can be a nutrivore no matter how you eat, if those things are important to you. And I make a big argument in this book about why everyone should think about being a nutrivore and how they could apply that to any way of eating. And the 4 things that I mentioned, so nutrient density is just how much nutrition per energy density, so per calorie, that food has. So like liver is a very, a food that not a lot of people like, but I will tell you it is the most nutrient dense food on the planet. So when you look at how much iron and zinc and fat soluble vitamins and B vitamins, all that stuff, it's just off the charts. So when you rank foods, just you eat a very small amount of that, but you get a ton of nutrition as compared to something like, white rice, which basically has just it's a source of carbohydrate. There really isn't a lot of minerals or vitamins or things like that in there. So nutrient density first. Second, quality. So if you take a carrot that was grown in your backyard without pesticides or chemical fertilizers, and then you go and you get like an industrial farmed carrot, even if it's organic, the nutrient density is going to be different, right? We have studies showing this, especially as the decades have gone on and agricultural has changed. The nutrient density of fruits and vegetables has changed. So the quality changes there, getting local, if you can grow anything of your own, growing your own, and then of course organic. And organic doesn't just matter because of the pesticides, it also matters because when plants are grown without pesticides, they actually have to have their own defense mechanisms against the environment, and so they produce more phytonutrients, and phytonutrients are good for us. So there's more than one reason to eat organic. And then as far as animals, the animals that we eat are only as healthy as they are with whatever diet they're eating. So pork is the protein that has the highest variation of quality based on what they eat. So if you can find truly pasture-raised pigs that are allowed to roam free out in the sun, their skin actually makes vitamin D and their fat contains vitamin D. So it's a big misconception. There isn't vitamin D in food. You can actually get it from pastured pork. And actually the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, which is a big factor in controlling anti-inflammatory or pro-inflammatory processes in the body. They did a study last year in Missouri where they took pigs that were just fed grain, and then they took pigs that were purely pastured, and the same breed of pigs, same farmer raised them. They just fed them different things. And they found that one of them, the conventionally raised pigs, had 30-to-1 ratio, and then the pastured pigs had 4-to-1 ratio. So just that chemical makeup of the fats is just crazy. So this applies to like fish, wild caught versus farmed. It applies to beef, grass fed versus corn fed. Just the quality Chicken, is a big piece.
Eggs, all of it.
Seasonality is important. Fruits and vegetables, not only do they taste better in season, but they have more nutrient density. So when we have these fruits and vegetables that are ripened in trucks, so they're picked early, they haven't had enough time to draw all of the nutrients that they possibly could from the plant they came from. So they're picked early, they're thrown in a truck or a plane. A lot of times they're exposed to chemicals in order to ripen them. The seasonality piece is big. And then lastly, variety. So are you switching up what you're eating? Are you eating, lots of different types of vegetables, lots of different plant families? There's over something like 30,000 types of plant families, and we only cultivate about 150 of them. So, wild foods, if you're into seafood, trying different shellfish, different types of fish. If you like red meat, you eat red meat, maybe try bison. There's so many options there. So all of that is kind of what I talk about in the book, and how 4 ways that people can consider in order to eat like a nutrivore.
So nutrient density, quality, seasonality, and variety.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, and the food tastes better too.
Totally.
If you're familiar with Chef Dan Barber of Blue Hill at Stone Barns, they've studied this extensively. This is like one of the best restaurants in the world.
Yep.
And studied this extensively at their culinary farm of just well-nourished soil and organic produce picked at the peak of seasonality. They've measured this, not just the nutrient density comparison is totally different, but the flavor is like off the charts better than, even as you said, even an industrially grown organic carrot versus, but
our
of
taste
course,
buds know.
Right.
That's information. That's our body telling us something. It's, when you pick a wild blueberry and you put that in your mouth, oh my gosh, your taste buds are going, whoa, and it's like, there's all those phytonutrients, and yes, those berries are smaller, they probably haven't had as much water. And we even figured out how to trick those wild plants into just kind of having this epic, huge harvest. But that is like a little nutrient density bomb,
Right.
So,
yes. Well, and you've got this great chart in the book here. It's a side-by-side comparison for the nutrition profile of a chicken breast versus sardines, 4 ounces of each. And I mean, it's mind-blowing when you really look at it that way. And chicken breast is such a common protein. It's, as a food person, like it's one of those things that drives you a little bit crazy because people get afraid of their food. They're like, oh, bones, skin, ugh, and the boneless, skinless chicken breast is this very comes in its tidy little styrofoam container. It's very comfortable and easy for people to source and to cook and to handle and things like that. But the nutrition in that versus, we're talking about, in some cases, not just 20 times more nutrient, but hundreds times more nutrients with, calcium, phosphorus, double the potassium in sardines, double the selenium, way more zinc, what are some of the other really big ones in here?
The omega-3s are just like crazy.
Oh, yeah. Omega-3 in a 4-ounce chicken breast, 0.1 grams in 4 ounces of sardines, 1.8 grams. And here's another crazy one. Chicken, 5.7 international units of vitamin D in the chicken breast versus 218.9 international units in the same portion of sardines.
Yeah. And that's I use that example, not because I want people to think that they shouldn't eat chicken, but eating sardines instead of chicken a couple times a week is just going to be so much better. For just think of how many people take selenium, of course, thyroid people. Zinc is a really common supplement because it's a really common deficiency. Fish oil. How many people are taking fish oil? If you eat enough sardines, you don't have to take any of those supplements. You can easily get that from food. So I'm trying to show people that, sometimes if they prioritize this in their food just by upping the nutrient density, occasionally they can actually get this transformative experience with healing just because the whole thing is elevated,
Right. I'm curious, do you think that highly inflammatory foods like gluten and dairy are best to avoid just kind of across the board? Like, I know AIP isn't necessarily something, the elimination phase or phase 1, right, of AIP isn't necessarily something we're supposed to stay on long term. We're supposed to try to reintroduce things, right? Are there like across the board things that you feel like just nobody should really eat this?
Yeah, I think anyone with autoimmune disease should stay away from gluten forever. I think there's a good scientific evidence about the way that it interacts with our digestive system, with our immune systems. We already know what's going on with our immune system in autoimmune disease, and just gluten is not something that anyone with any kind of autoimmune disease, I think, wants to be eating knowingly. Of course, we all get exposed here and there because it's just everywhere. Dairy is interesting because especially high quality dairy can be very nutrient dense, and there are some people that tolerate it quite well. So in the Autoimmune Protocol, the reintroductions, we have people reintroduce in stages. So stage 1 are foods that are most nutrient dense and least likely to cause an issue. And then moving down to stage 4, these are the foods that are least nutrient dense, most likely to cause a problem. A lot of the dairy foods, especially higher quality dairy, are around stage 2 or 3. And it's going to depend what form that is in. So, like ghee is the first dairy reintroduction. If people are okay with ghee, they can move on to butter. If they're okay with butter, then they can move on to cheese. But then if they try the cheese, they should try, a non-cow type. So maybe like a sheep's milk. It's much better if it's raw. So there's the quality thing. That's really where it comes into it. And, if you're having, some high quality dairy products that come from really happy grass-fed animals, those are actually incredibly nutrient dense. It's actually a really good source of vitamin K2, which is a fat-soluble vitamin that's actually a little bit tricky to get in the diet. And also, some other great nutrients. So, unfortunately, I am one of the weird people that I react even to ghee, which, ghee is actually so tolerable that, Dr. Sarah Ballantyne almost considered making it a part of AIP. I'm actually grateful she didn't, because I identified that my sensitivity is that much, so I can't have any cross-contamination. Yeah. But I've worked with many people who have been able to reintroduce varying levels of dairy. Most people can't drink like off the shelf milk. That's probably, like a stage 4, but a lot of people can find that they do more of the fattier parts of dairy, okay, if it's high quality. So it just really depends on the person.
And what level of reaction it makes it so that, this is something that is not right for my body? Like, I notice if I have a little bit of dairy, I notice more joint pain. And so I don't really eat much dairy, but once in a while I love cheese. So once in a while I'll choose, I'm going to eat this because I really just want to enjoy this. And I might have a little bit of inflammation for a few days, but it's not so severe for me personally. But that's been a question in my mind is, if my body's giving me this feedback, does this mean that I should never, ever eat it?
I mean, so that's kind of where the whole long-term diet philosophy comes in. So my approach is that you want to be on a diet that maximizes your healing potential, but is also the least restricted. So I'm not into restriction just because you think you should be doing it, or, you want to cover all the bases. I actually want people in the maximum where they get the best health. So incorporating as many foods as their body says is okay. And that line might change. So you might go through a flare and it might be like you're battening down the hatches, you're getting closer to AIP. And then you might be like, I'm feeling so great, I'm going to go on a vacation to Europe. I did this last year, unfurl the sails, a couple glasses of wine here and there, eating some gluten-free foods that, processed foods that I normally would not touch because of some little ingredients or whatever. And then guess what? Had a little flare, came home, battened down the hatches. That experience sometimes is worth it, to be somewhere, having an experience. And that's how I make the decision for my own life. If I am getting a really good social experience, I'm getting to, be with people that I love, share something with them, I'm all for it. Like if it's I call them gray area foods. If that's like kind of gray area for me, sometimes I'll make that decision. Now, if you're doing that every few days, I think long-term, you're going to see an impact from that. And I would say that, that's probably something that you don't want to be eating normally. And a lot of times we batten down the hatches when we're home and when we can control things and when we can just store up that good health. And then when we're in a situation like travel, where there's something that's maybe a little more gray area, you can experiment with it and see how you do. And I would definitely say that, joint pain is a pretty clear sign, but some people also have tolerance thresholds. So for me with eggs, I don't have a good dairy example because I can't do any dairy, but eggs, I can do eggs fine in baked goods. I can do maybe an egg on something if it's like, over easy or something. I can do a scrambled egg. If I have too many eggs, at once, or if I have one egg like too many days in a row, I start to have problems. And then I just kind of back up and go, okay, I'm off the eggs for a while. And then I'll start putting an egg on, a hash in the morning or something. So that's maybe a way of looking at it that you can see like, oh, I'm actually the one in control here. I'm not just trying to follow some random rules. I'm going to go by how I feel. I'm going to try to get myself to feel the best, but I'm not going to obsess over it. And, if I'm in a situation where I want to see where the boundary is, I'll see where the boundary is. If it wasn't worth it, I won't make that mistake again. And that's how you have, I think, a healthy relationship for, your healing journey, which is going to last the rest of your life, because we haven't figured out how to cure this stuff yet. So right. We're all going to have to manage the best we can,
Well, and that's interesting. Just because I know that Jenny has an intolerance to eggs, but she said, just like what you said a moment ago, she's like, well, I'll have one or I'll have and then I pull back and I'm like, I'm not going to have an egg. I know better. My body tells me.
But I was having major GI issues eating a lot of eggs when I had eliminated gluten and dairy from my diet, because so many, when you eliminate those things for breakfast, there's a lot of eggs and there's a lot out there about how healthy, how nutrient dense eggs are, right? Well, Dan and I say this all the time. Every body is different. We're all bio-individual. And that's where, following like a dietary template doesn't always work for everybody. And I had no idea I was so had such a problem with eggs, because it wasn't eat them and get sick. It was gradually eat too many and gradually have this debilitating stomach pain.
Yeah. And that's
I can have it, but just a little bit,
Yeah. Part of the benefit of like clearing the slate is just so that you can see what the baseline is. You're like, oh, this is how good I can feel. And then when you start adding things in and you don't feel as good, you go, okay, something's going on. And sometimes it's not as easy as like, oh, I ate this and then I got a rash. Like, that's great when that happens, but it doesn't always happen like that. So a lot of times it's like this tolerance level where it's like, okay, I can have one egg, but I can't have 3. Like, fine. That's information that you now have that you can take into the future and, make the best choice that you can with,
Right. Oh, I love that. Well, that's so well put. And thank you so much for being here with us, Mickey. We're so excited about your new book, and thank you for answering so many of our burning questions. about, how to be a nutrivore and how to navigate AIP and make these changes sustainable and successful for us. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you both ladies for what you do for this community. I know everyone appreciates your work, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. It was really fun.
Thank you. So you guys can find Mickey at autoimmunewellness.com. You can check out her brand new book, The Nutrient-Dense Kitchen. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Thyroid Refresh TV, where we give you the information and inspiration you need to make the best choices for your health. Join our thriving community at thyroidrefresh.com or learn more about Thyroid 30, our revolutionary 30-day wellness adventure at thyroidrefresh.com/thyroid30. And also, we would love it if you would subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or leave a review. Thanks so much, guys. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you.